CountryWide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lamp.
Cameron Bagrie from Bagrie Economics is sitting there waiting to have a bit of a chat with us. A few things going on. Fonterra's cut its payout forecast. We got some interest rates going up. Farm input costs are rising, and there's lots of global uncertainty as Trump gets bored with peace again, decides he wants to have another war. To have a look at this, and actually a little bit of politics, local politics wrapped in. Cameron Bagrie, lead economics at Bagrie Economics. G'day, mate. Welcome to the show. Gee, certainly a lot going on. Can we start with Fonterra? Were you overly surprised by the 50 cents? Do you think that's the end of it?
Well, we hope it's not the end of it, but yeah, the way things are going around the globe at the moment, you could go up, could go down. There's a little bit of support coming through from that New Zealand dollar, which is still sub sort of 60 cents. But I was a little bit surprised how well milk prices have held up in the last sort of 12 months. And obviously the world is now awash with milk. When there's a lot more supply in the system, the price tends to come back down. But I wonder as well with the geopolitics, a little bit of geostrategic manoeuvring is sort of behind the scenes here with one of the key buyers, obviously China.
It's an interesting one. Volatility is something that, and uncertainty is something that is very, very certain. The forecast previously with the global supply situation has been interesting, though, and never really came to it at the end of last season. So how much can we kind of look into the future, into what's happening from a standard supply and demand model versus, the world demand for milk?
Well, I guess there's a whole lot sort of going on, both from the demand side of the equation and the supply side. And yeah, the global growth has held up remarkably well in the last sort of 12 months, particularly in some pretty big economies, the United States, even China. The supply side, I think, is really interesting, because one of the things that I think about in regard to inflation, and we are seeing a bout of inflation around the globe, is that inflation knocks around countries that have got poor cost structures more than others. New Zealand is seeing input costs are moving up. We don't like inflation. Headline inflation in New Zealand is going to be around 4% when we see the number for the end of June in a couple of weeks. That's not great. But yeah, most countries around the globe are seeing 4% inflation as well. In fact, Australian inflation, it looks like it's going to be 4.5%, maybe 5%. And what that's doing for cost structures across some of our competitors, it's actually, I think, undermining them more than us. And the fact that we've been pretty lean and what you call mean in regard to productivity we get on farm, this could be a little bit of what you call it will wrinkle out the weak players around the globe. And over the long term, that will play into New Zealand's advantage. But in the near term, it's not a great story.
Yeah, but what about if those competing markets that are subsidised in their production?
Well, this is one of the big challenges we've had, or the fights we've had for the past sort of 30 years, because New Zealand has forced the farming sector to stand on your own 2 feet, no support. Where we're going globally at the moment is that, look, governments around the globe are going to get forced, I think, in the next sort of 10 to 20 years to make some pretty hard decisions, because they're running out of money. You can't continue to borrow and spend, and New Zealand has had to bite that bullet. A lot of other countries have not yet had to face up to economic reality, but they will have to face up to economic reality eventually, because there's a whole lot of competing interests out there at the moment for what to do with cash. Obviously, people want tax relief, you've got health. A big one around the globe at the moment is, where is every country going to find the money for defence spending?
Yeah, well, Mr. Trump is well and truly pushing that. In fact, making sure that people, he wants countries to pay their share, because, and those are big numbers, aren't they, Cameron? Like, if you're doubling your defence spending, you want people to go from 2 to 4, some countries even go to 5. That's extraordinary numbers.
Well, if you look New Zealand at the moment, defence spending is about 1.2% of GDP. Now, the target is to take it to 2. Now, to get to 2% of GDP in 10 years' time, cumulatively, is going to cost us about $35, $36 billion. Now, Trump's talking about, he wants 3.5. Now, to go from 1.2 to 3.5 in the next 10 years, you've got to find about $85 billion. So where on earth that pot of gold is going to come from is anybody's sort of guess. But New Zealand's starting from a real low position in regard to defence. But you have a look at what's going on in the likes of Germany at the moment. Suddenly Germany has realised they need to re-armorise, and they're borrowing to do it.
That's really, it's really quite scary, actually. Let's turn to OCR and interest rates, and that's the start of the hike, probably the inevitable start. It was just when. But do you think that the Reserve Bank's communication is hitting the mark just widely across the whole nation in terms of the understanding of the why?
Yeah, I think the new governor is doing a really good job, but the Reserve Bank is more than one individual. You know, you got a board, you got a governance structure, you got a monetary policy committee. Yeah, they just about hiked in May. Yeah, it was 3-3, and the governor decided, well, we're going to pause. So it was pretty well certain that we're going to go in July. And yeah, the official cash rate at the moment is it's 2.5. It was 2.25. Yeah, we call neutral for the official cash rate. I think that's somewhere around 3 to 3.5%. Yeah, that's where the Reserve Bank's neither got the foot on the accelerator or the brake. If you strip out the property market, Auckland, the Bay, plenty in Wellington, if you look at the rural communities, like the rural side of New Zealand is going really well. And we're seeing it within the export numbers, we're seeing it within rural spending coming through small towns, that sort of stuff. So there's no logical reason for the official cash rate to be way south of neutral. So what the Reserve Bank sort of signalled is that, guess what, we're going to take the Reserve Bank policy settings, i.e. the OCR, back to cup of tea land, i.e. where we don't think we need to do much. And what's that target? It's around 3.
Right. So we are going to see that rising. We've seen the 25%. You think 0.25? Get that right? Do you think we're going to see that again this year, Cameron?
I think we'll see at least another 1, probably 2 before the end of the year, which of course is going to carry political connotations, because ideally a central bank doesn't want to be shifting the official cash rate around the timing of an election, but it looks like they're going to be bump in the middle or around the timing of an election.
Yeah, hence why I was just asking around, the ability to communicate the cost of living discussion, in regards to whether that's going to make a material difference because of imported inflation.
Well, it's not just imported inflation, i.e. oil prices, fertiliser prices. Obviously, they went up, they've come back down, now they're bouncing back up because we've got geopolitics around the globe, and Lord knows what Donald Trump is going to do next. But if you look at what's called core inflation, which strips out food and energy, those volatile items, core inflation in New Zealand is still running around 2.5 to 3. Now, we should have that number around 2. So core inflation is still running slightly above the expectations. And to be fair, some of that core inflation is sort of stuff that the Reserve Bank can't really control, i.e. rates, energy, your electricity bill. And it looks like, the new normal for core inflation might be 2.5. If we're not here to get rates or electricity bills down on the other side. But the headline inflation is not the problem at the moment, it's core inflation. And it's the same thing in Australia. Australia's got core inflation around 3.5. We just saw some numbers out of the United States overnight. Their core inflation is 2.6. Few central banks have had core inflation at 2% since 2019.
Not much we can do about that. Or is there a lot of that? Is some of that just red tape, Cameron? Is that part of what the problem we've got, why we are getting up from that 2 to 2.5?
Well, part of it, I think, there's been a structural shift around the globe where, we had a big inflationary support variable, which helped keep inflation low for a long time, which is globalisation. The importing of cheap products from China. And that had our backs for 20 to 30 years. Unions didn't have an awful lot of wage bargaining power. We did have to take account of climate change, sustainability into the equation. You get technology in there as well. Well, it was pretty easy to hit 2% inflation. Now the world is butting heads. So America and China, you've got Trump's tariffs. You've got the cost shock out of Hormuz. You've got restrictions on rare earths. You've got issues in regard to port, logistics, supply chains. Unions, I think, are going to start to flex their muscle a little bit around the globe, because no one likes to see inflation going up at 4% and your wages are not going up at 4% because you're going backwards. Now, AI is still going to help us, i.e. technology, get inflation down. But you've got a whole lot of deflationary forces that are no longer as deflationary. So my personal view is that the new normal for inflation is probably now 2.5 to 3.
Okay.
The interesting elements with regards to, you called it gender economics, and Trump particularly overnight with the escalation of this. What would you be keeping a close eye on with regards to the barrel price? And is it, obviously there's nothing we can do.
Well, there's two things that I'm watching really closely at the moment, and there were two buffer variables that we leaned on pretty heavily when Hormuz really kicked off. And obviously oil prices went up, but oil prices didn't go up as far as what was feared because of two buffers. And buffer one was America started to export a lot of oil. And when they exported oil, just like we export dairy products and we export beef, well, guess what? The people at home pay the global price of dairy products and the global price of beef. So the American consumer is now paying the global price of petrol because the exporters can now get X on the global stage. So there's a limit, I think, politically as to how much American exports can go up before you get that grumpiness at home. And the second buffer was that we saw a big collapse to the tune of about 6-7 billion barrels a day of less Chinese demand. Now, both those buffers, I think, are questionable in regard to how long they can operate and you can draw down reserves. So unfortunately, around the globe at the moment, Iran knows this, and time is on their side. Time is not on Trump's side.
Interesting.
No, certainly not. Hey, Cameron, Sarah and I were talking at the start of the show about Paul Henry, about the election coming up, the rise of celebrity politicians. You suggested to me we're starting to see a modern version of Rob's Mob. What do you make of what we're seeing currently in the lead up to the 2026 election?
Well, you have a look at one of the numbers I keep an eye on is the percentage of the vote that goes to National and Labor, which is sort of what you call centralist politics. That number used to be 70 to 80, even 90% in the 1990s. The latest polls have got Labor and National at 61, which means your periphery is at 39. And that's far left and far right. And that's where you get the situation where you got sort of the tails wagging the dog, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember right back in the 1970s and early 80s, there was Rob's Mob. And Rob's Mob was that ordinary sort of bloke that was not seeing decent pay increases, inflation was going up, traditionally a Labor voter, and they swung over behind Rob Muldoon. Well, I'm looking at things at the moment in New Zealand, and I'm wondering about Peter's Pack. You start to think about Top's Lot, or what about Henry's Horde? Because there is a whole lot of people out there at the moment that, there's the young that are grumpy about being able to afford a house. You've got, the people aged 65 plus that obviously want superannuation settings to change. So Winston's praying into that lot. You've got a whole lot of people that are obviously got green sustainability interests at heart. And then you've got people out there that Henry's going to play into that just want economic reform, get on with the goddamn job.
Yeah. Interestingly, I'd just love your thoughts on the rise of Top and the tax policy.
Well, I don't like their tax policy, but I like their competition policy.
Okay, explain.
Well, the land tax, I don't think we can go down that route. It's just not workable. But what they're very strong on is the belief that we need to shake the tree on competition policy. So the background here is pretty simple. New Zealand's got two crises. We talk about one crisis, and one crisis is obviously the cost of living. Well, there's actually another crisis, which is an income crisis. Wages are too low. When wages are too low and costs go up, well, guess what? It hurts. Now, if you think about what competition policy can do, it drives firms to be smarter, more efficient. It limits the ability of firms to put up prices. What competition policy also does is because it drives firms to be more efficient, it drives this thing called productivity growth. So competition policy sits at the nexus, the intersection of two big crises we've got. And it's only the Opportunities Party that I think's worked that out.
It's interesting though why they've been so beaten up on the land tax when they really should have led out with their productivity angle. And and what do you think with regards to where they'll sit if they could actually drop the land tax and actually campaign to be an option on both sides?
Well, if they get in, I think they'll go hard within any bargaining in regard to competition policy. I'll think they'll drop the land tax demands when push comes to shove, because I don't think that'll be workable with either side of the house.
Yeah, National don't want it. Labor don't want it, of course. Maybe the Greens do. Cameron, just on them though, is it? They're an interesting phenomenon that they're not kind of the same. Well, they're kind of the same, but not of the teals in Australia. But is it a time now? Are they an actual movement? Do you think?
Well, you have a look at what we've seen on universities in the past sort of decades, and how well the Greens have gone securing the university vote. In some parts of Auckland, what we're seeing in Wellington Central, what you're seeing down in North Dunedin. And a lot of this, I think, just goes back to, the younger, there's a big standoff here between the younger generation and the older generation, because the older generation has made a lot of money over the recent decades out of surging property prices, which is great for one portion of the population, and because it's not that great if you're the younger generation, because you can't afford a house. And we know house prices have come down, but the ratio of house prices to income is still double what it was way back in the year 2000. So it's still pretty tough out there for the younger generation. When you see that sort of alienation, people naturally sort of push back and they go to the political periphery. They want to see change. They want to see something different. And the question is, where are they going to head? It looks like COP's getting a little bit of movement in the polls.
Yeah. Hey, interestingly, flipping back to Paul Henry, our discussion at the start of the show was, he's made it pretty clear he's not here to muck around. He wants to be high on the list. He wants a cabinet minister position. What do you think where he would be most effective, rather than just the theatre of watching Paul Henry in the House?
Where would he be most effective? Look, he's come out and he's been open that he's going to play the populism card. Now, I'm not a big believer as supporters of people that play the populist card. Yes, if you think about politicians, there's sort of two types. One's a preacher, just gets out there and sings and dances a lot and says a whole lot of sort of stuff. And then one's what we call a plumber. Those are the ones that are not that necessarily good at public speaking, but by how they can get the job done. You go back and you have a look at people such as Tim Groser. Tim Groser was a plumber. He was not a preacher. So he wasn't a good politician, but by hell, he was a great politician because he was damn good at what he did. We need more plumbers in politics. That's my personal view.
We do. Some, minister of everything like Stephen Joyce. It's going to be an interesting election, and it's heating up already, both El Niño and the election. On El Niño, though, I just want to ask you, we've been priming to try and get some form of what's going on with response planning for this potential drought that's ahead of us. Andy, it sounds like MPI are putting together a response plan, and we'll follow that closely. But what do you think from an economic perspective this could potentially have, and have you done any modelling or know of any modelling that's there for primary exports?
No, it's on the radar at the moment. So there's the old sort of, you put on a risk management hat and thinking about this, you hope for the best, but you plan otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Cameron, thank you. We've taken a lot of your time. Really enjoyed having you on the show and joining us from Hampton Downs behind you. Another great background. We'll catch up with you again very, very soon. Cameron Bagrie from Bagrie Economics joining us on CountryWide Connect.
CountryWide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lapp.